Some of my friends are packing for evacuation.
For flooding?
Yeah.
Do they live out on the river?
They live near the burn. You know, they live near a lot of the scars. And we're only 2 blocks away from one of the last mandatory evacuation lines. So we're kind of nervous.
Oh, no kidding.
I don't think it's going to cross the river necessarily, but you never know.
Well, when they're evacuating, they can go get a haircut now.
Yeah. That's the good news.
Right.
Is that a new thing? We just,
Yeah. They
Yeah.
just lifted the order.
wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're purple now.
And I just cut my wife's hair.
Too soon.
Looks like you survived, Tom. I hope that she did as well.
Right, really.
Well, I cut the front of my hair, but she was supposed to cut the back, but she doesn't cut enough off. She's afraid to.
Well, you'll be
always
able
better
to get
go long.
some professional assistance now, should you desire. I see it's 3. I see the committees here. I think we should go ahead and get started. Jane, is that okay with you?
That's fine.
All right, then I'm going to begin with a roll call of the commissioners. Dave Cahill,
Here.
Deborah Doyle,
Here.
Thomas Hauser,
Here,
Barbara McKenzie,
Here.
and I'm here as well. Okay, that's great. I see that if we take any votes, they need to be by roll call. Public appearances. Do we have any public appearances today? Hearing none, I'll move on to the next item, action items by motion. There are none. So we're going to get into discussion. Before we do, since the first item of discussion is the financial reports, I wanted to check in with you all briefly and find out, A, were you able to pick up printed reports from your local branch? And if so, B, how did that work out for you?
Well, I had no trouble at all picking up my reports from the Northwest branch. They were not that helpful because the images were still letter size, although some of them were printed on bigger paper. I don't know if Jane can expand the actual size of the images that are being transmitted or not.
Did you not get the reports, the budget to actual reports, Dave, on legal size paper like this?
No, mine were on legal paper, but the image was as small as it was on letter size. So the image on mine did not get any larger. Yours looks like it got bigger.
It did, and I think that's a function of who prints it at the branch, not of what Jane sends to them. Jane, I'm seeing you nod. Is that your understanding as well?
Yes, it is. There was at a few branches, people had difficulty printing what I sent them. So that's why I wanted this feedback. We need to get some better instructions to give to the branch for printing.
Well, I'm just going to say that what they, and I do want to hear from everybody else, but what they did very kindly for me at the Healdsburg branch was the 2 budget to actual reports for property tax and sales tax. They printed on tableau size paper.
Wow.
So this is actually not legal. This is 11 by 17, which made the reports very easy to read. Did anybody else have success with this?
I thought it was much, much better because in the past, not only was it small, but it would be broken up on pieces of paper. I just couldn't follow it all. I sent it to you, Andy, and you saw what a mess.
Yeah, I saw.
So, I mean, I just got my eye really close to the page and I could actually see what was happening this month. So that was a great improvement that way. I still think we need to look at the possibility of leaving all those months out, maybe do it quarterly reporting or something like that. So there aren't so many columns.
I understand. For those large reports, were yours printed on tableau paper, legal size,
No.
or letter size?
No,
They were not.
Um,
Okay.
Which size were they printed on, please?
I think I had everything on letter size, and then the ones that were really wide were also printed on legal size. But there was still really small print.
Yes. Yeah.
I had given instructions. I had included the whole packet and then the budget to actuals for both property and sales tax with instructions to print those on the legal size. But like I say, it turns out that some branches had difficulty printing. So I need to put together some instructions for them from your feedback.
Jane, if you could lobby Northwest to print on tableau size with an expanded image like they did for Andy, that would really be helpful. Maybe they can't do it. I don't know.
Barbara, Deborah, what were your experiences?
Mine was also on legal and small.
Yeah, and mine was legal and small, but ready and nice.
Okay, all right. So Jane, I picked these up from the Healdsburg branch. John was not in that day, so Megan was filling in for him, and she took care of the printing, and maybe would be the person to reach out to find out how she did this, because I think I ended up with the best set.
As you should.
Well, you are the chair.
Well, yeah, thank you, but I apologize. I apologize to everybody for we're obviously getting there, but we're not all the way there. Okay, so the first item is the financial reports for December 2020, and I hope that you've all had a chance to review them, so that rather than going through in detail, I wanted us to focus on your comments and, most importantly, your questions for Randy and for Ann. Let's just take it one at a time and go through the initial report, the property and sales tax funds. Any comments or questions on this?
My comment is we seem to be doing better than expected from our tax income,
Yes, we are.
which is very important for the other item on the agenda, I think,
Yeah.
or one of the other items.
No, I agree, Tom and Dave. I know you had written to me as well about this. Our property tax revenues are significantly ahead of budget and above last year's actuals, even though we had, I think, cautiously and appropriately used a lower projection for budget purposes. Sales tax revenues are also significantly ahead of budget and above last year's actuals. So good news messages here. Any
Yeah,
Yeah.
Andy, I had a question about that page, page 5. Is that where we are, 5?
Yes.
Okay. I still don't understand, and I observed the Measure Y committee, they actually had the same question. And Randy answered it, but I didn't quite get that. And that's the under sales tax for July and August, why those columns are blank. And I know there's, this kind of, we're 2 months late, getting our sales tax, but even then, I don't understand why nothing shows in those columns, because of course we do get something every month. I understand that there's a connection to adjustments to cash at the bottom there. And so I'm thinking that under July, the adjustments to cash is 781,423, and the same thing for August with the 1,031,482. But I don't quite know why the report looks like this. I wondered if Randy could enlighten us.
Yes, and Randy, before you say something, Jane, could you expand that image a little bit, please, so it fills the available space?
that better?
It's better. I think we can go maybe one notch larger.
All righty, how about that?
That's better.
And then we can pinch it out too, or at least I can on my iPad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Randy, can I add on to Barbara's question? And maybe you can, this will help and maybe it won't. But when I look at the number in September, is that showing us the sales tax revenue that we received in the month of September?
Yes, the 1,149,000 was what we received cash basis deposited by CDTFA, which used to be called Board of Equalization, in September. And that represents the actual receipts that the state collected during the month of July.
Okay.
So yeah, again, as Barbara pointed out, I mentioned, we are 2 months behind. And so that's the reason why we're not seeing any revenues in July and August, is that while we did get a check from the CDTFA in both July and August, that revenue was already recognized in the prior fiscal year as a receivable. So the cash as you pointed out, the adjustments to cash, you will see the cash going in down there. However, we're not showing it as revenue because that revenue was already recognized last fiscal year. So that's part of your 1920 actuals.
Yeah, so I think the way to think about this, Barbara, is, and Randy, correct me if I'm misstating it, that what we show here for each month is revenue collected during that month and expenses that were paid during that month, not necessarily related to the date that the revenue refers to. So as Randy's saying, the revenue figure in September shows revenues collected in September paid to the library in September, even though they were originally spent by consumers back in July.
Yeah, well,
Correct. Yeah.
what I don't get though is that we're obviously on a kind of a rolling 12 months, right? I mean, we're gonna have 12 months worth of revenue.
Yep.
And this is year end, December 31st. So this should have 6 months of revenue in it. And I just don't understand the mechanics of why we're posting it, but we're posting as adjustments to cash. And is it, we're trying to be that specific about what month it was collected in?
This is what I think would be referred to as generally accepted accounting principles.
So one thing you have to understand is that the way the county works is we do accrual-based accounting only at the end of the fiscal year.
Okay.
So in June, we will do all of our receivables and all of our payables. As Andy correctly pointed out, the expenses that you're seeing that are posting in, let's say, September, a lot of times those are actually payment of invoices from services provided in August or maybe even late July. It's all based on timing. Everything gets caught up in June. You'll always see a very large amount of revenues recognized and a large amount of expenses recognized in the final month of the fiscal year, because that's when it all comes to a head. And that's why we take 3 extra weeks to close the books. Every year it goes until almost the end of July, because we have to gather all of those expenses and recognize all those revenues through June 30th. But until then, this is basically a cash basis report. This is not an accrual basis report.
Randy, that's a lot of help for me because I've had similar questions, but I'm not the expert. So we only do accrual at the end of each fiscal year. That's good to know.
I have a question for Randy. Is this the way all California governments report? Is this unique to Sonoma County? Is this part of the generally accepted accounting practices for government agencies or what?
That's actually a really good question. I don't know, or I'm not aware of any other county that goes through an accrual on a monthly basis. I do know that there are some entities that require that. I can just tell you from my experience with Sonoma County that this is the way that we have always gone about doing reporting. It would be very labor intensive to try to do accrual reporting at the end of every month.
I'm not asking that question. What I'm asking is accrual for the year the accepted way that California government should be accounting for revenue and expenses?
Yes, yes. We need to make sure that every year you have 12 months of revenue, 12 months of expenses.
Okay. And is that also part of the national, international systems for government?
It's generally accepted accounting principles to make sure that it's something. The most basic principle in accounting is the recognition of revenues and expenses for the time period in which they were incurred. So we need to, and I'm sorry if that doesn't make sense.
I'm going to say that's not the way I've always run my business.
Okay.
If it comes in, it gets reported as income. When it goes out, it gets reported as an expense. So at the end of the year, it doesn't quite work out that way, and there's lag. So, but for government, accrual for the year is the accepted system we should be using.
Right. We're adhering to what's called the matching principle in accounting. We're making sure that the time periods are all matched up when you get to the end of the reporting period, that what you're reporting for your actual expenses and revenues for the fiscal period or fiscal year that ended June 30th is actually attributable to activity that happened during June or during July to June.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this report? Okay, Jane, can we see the next page, please? This is just the cash balance summary. Were there any questions or concerns here? Okay. Next page, please. These are our, thank you. These are our voucher payments over $25,000. At the last meeting, we said we were going to continue to report these exactly as we have been. You can see that there were just 3 for the month of December. Were there any questions on this? Okay, let's get into the heart of the reports then. And I realize this is one that's going to be a little bit harder to, we're going to have to shrink this down a little bit, Jane.
Okay. Any more?
I think we can enlarge it a little bit.
Okay. How about that?
And if you can move it,
This
there
one?
we go. That's it. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, is that enough?
A little bit.
Yeah, you know what? I think we're going to have to make it just a little bit small. I'm sorry. Is it? Well, it doesn't give you any option in between.
There's not an in-between step, I'm sorry.
Okay, well, I hope that you all have had a chance to spend a little time with this. As you know, we've been talking about the fact that
How about that?
I think that's good.
Yeah.
That's
Terrific. Yeah.
that as we go through the course of the year, it's generally a good idea for us to keep an eye on what percentage of the budget we've already spent relative to the percentage of the year. So if we're at the midpoint in the year, we would generally expect that our expenses would be running at about 50% of our budget. Where they're not could require some further examination. It could be that we're still on track to meet our budget for the year, but our expenses were front-loaded in the first few months. Or it could be that we're actually running more expenses in a particular category than we had anticipated, and that we may need to make a budget adjustment to reflect that. So I've had a chance to go through this, and I've noted some areas that I thought would bear some additional scrutiny from Ann. But before I jump into that, I wanted to invite any members of the committee to ask any questions you have about any items that seem to you to be running ahead of where you would expect them to be at mid-year.
This is Tom Hauser. The one I noted was 52,115 books, media subscriptions. And that's about $1,500,000, which is 148%. So I just, I think that needs to be discussed somehow, explained.
Okay, Ann, I think I'm going to let you speak for the library, if you would, please. I'm happy to jump in and.
That's actually on the next page, so maybe I've gone ahead.
Well, I don't mind moving back and forth. That is one of the biggest items. So
I'm ahead of time. Maybe while we've got this page so we can look at it, we should say, is there anybody else has anything on this page?
Okay. Is there anybody else has anything on this page? I'm quoting a revered commissioner.
Oh, shut up.
Mr. Hauser.
I turned the pictures off so I could see the page, so I have no idea what you're saying, what you're looking at me like.
Okay, well, I'm gonna call out a few items if nobody else is.
Thank you.
But none of them appear on this first page.
Right.
So if there are no questions on this page, Shane, let's please go to the next page. Yeah. And this is where the first item is 50605. So since we're on this page, why don't we start with the one that that Tom asked about? It's
52115 at the bottom of the page.
52115.
It's not showing.
Media and subscriptions. There it is.
All right. So that one is running ahead of the property tax budget. Two things here. One, in September, the commission voted to increase the collections budget, but that has not been reflected in EFS yet. So this budget actually is not 148% of its total. The other part is, as you know, there are some of the expenses that are shared with sales tax, and those are usually backed out at the end of the year or quarterly. That's something that the CFO would do, and those have not been adjusted yet. So really, we're not in bad shape at all on books, media, and subscriptions.
Thank you, Ann. Tom, does that?
That's perfectly acceptable. It makes sense. I think it needs to be said to the commission.
Okay.
We can do that.
Yep. Good. Other items that you question or would like Ann to comment on? Well, I had one, and I think it's not a surprise to anybody. It's 51032, Janitorial Services. We're already above our budget for the year.
That one, again, is something that will be shared with sales tax. So at first I thought that we were running over budget and we might need to increase, but my feeling now is we should hold off on that and see how much is appropriate to transfer to sales tax, and then we'll know better where we stand. Our expenses have been a little higher than usual for janitorial, but I think we'll be okay on that line.
Okay, good. And I also had a question on I just want to be sure I'm not moving ahead of the pages. The very bottom of the second page, 52141,
Mhm.
minor equipment and small tools.
Yeah,
Um,
so those are things that are purchased in the field. So things that are not part of a regular supply line. If they're out doing a project and they need to stop and get some small tools like screwdrivers or hammers or whatever. So those will, again, part of that will be transferred to sales tax. And I thought they might be COVID related, but they are not. They're just regular small tools.
So I realize that some of that's going to be allocated to sales tax. I guess my question is this an item that could benefit potentially from more centralized control? Or is this just an area where we need to allow the people in the field latitude to, to make the purchases in a timely way?
Mhm. Well, that's something I'd like to discuss with Dave Tacheva. I don't know to what extent we could anticipate these expenses and go ahead and buy them ahead of time. That might be a good solution, but I do know that, sometimes things come up and you've got to run to the hardware store and get something. So let me talk with him before we get to the commission meeting, and I'll let you know where we're at with that.
Yeah.
One other possibility is that we're doing a lot of updating and renovation work. So we're having more things where you're likely to have to run to buy a little extra widget sometimes.
Mhm.
So ask that question of Dave also, please.
Okay.
And could you get a sense, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Could you get a sense also from him, is this the way he sees the rest of the year going? Or have they gotten, most of the bits? Is this something that, as things opened up, I'm sure they needed some things, but,
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm asking that.
Mr. Chair, this is Barbara. Could we go back just a second to that question about janitorial? It rang a bell with me. This was back to this issue of the policy. When we got Measure Y funds, all janitorial funds up till that point had been paid by the property tax. And once we got Measure Y funds, the additional janitorial expenses that would come into play because we were open more hours, that was the portion of the janitorial that would be charged to Measure Y. So it just is kind of always, something that's on the back of my mind all the time about specifying and making sure, especially when we say things like, well, we'll charge some of it to Measure Y, what that is and why that is, in more specificity. So I hope we can discuss that at some point in time.
Is it your understanding, Barbara, that I'm just going to make this up as an example, but that if a particular branch had been open 30 hours a week prior to Measure Y and is now open 40 hours a week, that of the total janitorial expenses for that branch, 30 of the 40 hours, or 3/4 of the janitorial expense, would be allocated to property tax, and the remaining 10 hours out of 40, or 25%, would be allocated to the sales tax?
Yeah, something very much like that, because Measure Y was to be spent on expansion of services. And so very much to what you just said, Andy, as an example.
Ann, is that consistent with your understanding of how we're doing this?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on the property tax budget to actual? Okay, let's move on, Jane. Thank you, to the sales tax Actual. What questions do you have here that you'd like Ann or Randy to address? I have a question, but it's not until page 2. So if anybody has questions on page 1, please. Well, actually, I do have a question on page 1 as well. And Ann, that's this is 50701. It's in the salary and benefits category. Our permanent position. First of all, I'm not sure I understand what the abbreviation is there. Perm position, local BDS. But I see that it's 70% of the year to date. Can you comment on both of those questions, please?
Sure. Well, I'm not sure what the local BDS means either, but I think Suzanne is on the call. She could answer that. But the high percentage there, I would say it's a combination of things. Part of it is the disaster pay that we were paying for a large part of the year. And also we've had a number of people leave employment with the library over the past 10, 11 months. And each time somebody leaves, of course, we have to pay out their benefits. So that's a large expense there. It won't be a continuing expense, but it has been a bit of a hit.
Got it. And I know that we will be looking later at the disaster pay again. So thank you. Suzanne, if you are on the call, can you tell us what local BDS means?
Yes, I am on the call. However, I have no idea what some of these EFS abbreviations are or how they were generated, by the county. So those are just accounting terms that Ken or a CFO or maybe even Randy, you might know. I would think it.
Yeah, sounds like a Randy question.
Local bonds or something, but we don't really have bonds, so I don't know really what that is.
This is Tom Hauser. You should ask Randy, but
Right.
Ken explained it to me that the county just puts that local BDS. It's on almost everything, it seems like, and he never understood exactly what it meant either.
Randy, any insights you can share with us?
I'd be happy to answer that one. Basically, what the county decided to do when they set up the chart of accounts is to have a unique string of salary and benefit accounts for those entities that are outside the county's payroll system. So local BDS stands for local boards. It's basically independent districts.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Sure.
And the other item that I have, and this is on page 2 of this report. So Jane, could you please scroll down for us again? Thank you. Is item 54305, machinery and equipment. I see $184,000 spent year to date with no budget amount. I know the question we had asked was, gee, could this be COVID related, or was this perhaps miscoded? What have you been able to find out about this item?
Right, that is COVID related. Those are for large equipment purchases, things like air scrubbers to buy for the branches.
Okay, understandable.
Mhm.
Good. Okay, I didn't have any other questions on this page. Did anybody else have any other questions on the sales tax detail? Okay, let's scroll down, and then the last 2 pages were just the statement of special funds activity, which I understand from our previous discussion might have some relevance as we get into the budgeting process, but I didn't see anything that we needed to discuss here in this session. Did anybody have any questions or items they wanted to call out about these last 2 pages?
Yes, I did, Mr. Chair. I wanted to address the undesignated ending fund balances. And this is the first time, I'm not opposed to this, but it's the first time I believe that we've had a fund balance listed for both the sales tax and the property tax independently. I could be wrong about that. But just to clarify, when we do an annual budget where it's our best guess at what we're going to take in and spend, and then at the end of that, we have either a surplus or a deficit, hopefully a surplus. But separate from that really is this ending fund balance, which is something more like reserves. And we do have a fund balance policy, and our fund balance policy says that we will have 15%, the amount equal to 15% of our annual budget, and with a goal of having 20%. And so these fund balances are significantly more than that at this point in time. And what a couple of years ago, when we were able to make our additional OPEB payment, it was because our fund balance policy said we would keep a certain amount, and we were over that. So we had $3 million or so to put into the fund balance. I only bring this up because I think it's a confusing topic. It's the end of the year budget surplus is very different from the fund balance. And it took me quite a while to kind of get my head around it. And I also, when we are able to have our annual audits completed, we will be able to see what our current OPEB liability is. And I would like to, of course, come back to this topic of our fund balance when we're able to see what our current OPEB liability is, and see what we can do about that. We also looked at the same time at our CalPERS responsibility, because CalPERS, of course, is going up. We don't have at this point in time a trust fund for the CalPERS liability like we do for the OPEB. And it's just something, again, a topic to not be lost for future discussion, to come back to that. Setting up a CalPERS trust fund is a little more complicated than what we've done for the OPEB. But anyway, it's just a topic that I want to kind of keep on the front burner.
Understood, and I appreciate you bringing that up. And we will be getting an update on the audits later in today's meeting. I've made a note, but let's be sure that when the audits are completed, that we circle back on this. I really appreciate that, Barbara.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, thank you all, commissioners, for poring over the numbers. Item number 5.2. This was something that came up last month at the request of Commissioner Hauser, asking for a detailed examination of items number 74810 and 74815 to identify related revenues and expenditures and any restrictions, particularly the Hyundai and foundation monies. This has become a source of some embarrassment to us. Randy, were you able to dig into this and find out any more detailed information for us?
Unfortunately, I have not been able to come to any type of conclusion or have a report ready to present to the committee. As I dig more into it, it's become apparent there have been some coding issues, some inconsistent use of cost codes to assign to both on the revenue side or the donation side, as well as the expenditure side. That's going to require quite a bit more digging in the weeds, so to speak, on my part. I hope to have something a little bit more substantive for you next month's meeting. I can give you a real quick example. When you mentioned the Hyundai donations, we discovered that those donations have been spread between both the Bequests Fund, the 74815, and the Gifts and Donations Fund, 74810. One of which was not coded to as a Hyundai donation. So I need to dig into, as I mentioned, dig in the weeds and kind of take a look at all both ins and outs for both funds before I'm comfortable presenting anything that I feel is accurate. So I would like to request that or make sure that it's okay that I defer that until next month for a more detailed report.
I understand that what you're saying. I do have a question. I mean, we're asking you to look kind of retroactively at past transactions, and I can understand that if they were not coded properly, that's going to make your work that much more difficult. Do we have any sense of now and going forward, if in fact both contributions and expenses related to these funds are being coded correctly, or are we continuing to exacerbate the existing problem because we don't have this under control?
That is what I'm hoping to uncover. I do believe that the necessary infrastructure is in place. There is an adequate coding structure set up to track these, but whether or not it's been used correctly or not, I can't answer to that. That's something that I need to still dig into.
I understand. Tom, do you want to weigh in on this?
I hope in 1 month you can get something for me, because I'm going to have to stop going to the Friends meetings.
Mr. Chair, Andy, a quick question for me.
Yeah.
This is Barbara. I actually was a person who wondered in the first place about the gifts and donations and the bequests. And then Tom asked more specifically about the Kundi. My questions about the gifts and donations and bequests, one of my questions was the same thing that was raised by the Measure Y committee, which is why we have two different funds. You know, what is the distinction between a gift and a bequest, for one thing? So I don't know if we have that written down someplace, but I think it's a good question to try to find out. I also referenced when we had this discussion last week, or last month, the fact that in the prior audits, there's reference to these funds, and it's more than the Kundi, pardon me, the Kundi fund. The last audit that I found that specified this, we were talking about the GE Cromwell Fund and the Leo Leon Hopkins Fund. And both of these had suffered pretty significant losses in revenue from, it's like a down year in the pooled cash thing. So they must be pretty good chunks of money. So those funds, which we've again kind of lost sight, we don't use their names anymore, are certainly two that I would like to know more about. I think one of them is dedicated to the Petaluma Library, and I'm not sure what the other one is. But anyway, it's a reference on page 18 of the 2016 and 17 audits, both, I believe. So anyway, yeah, the detail, the history, I don't know. It has to be someplace, but there are these references in the prior audit. So thank you.
Following up on that question, Randy, if you were able to, I'm not looking for the right word, unearth, decipher, recode the income and expenses relating to these two item numbers, would that information also clarify the additional funds that Barbara's asking about?
Yes, it certainly should. Both the funds that Barbara mentioned, I believe, are part of the bequests cash total. They actually make up the lion's share of that. And if I remember correctly, you mentioned that one is dedicated to Petaluma. Memory serves, I think both of them were shown as Petaluma related. In the 17-18 audit, there's a listing of all restricted balances that does tie into the cash balances for both the bequests and the gifts and donation funds at the same time. That looks like, if I'm remembering correctly, they were both related to Petaluma.
You are correct. That's right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Randy, do you happen to know if we either keep or should have kept a record for each bequest or donation clearly stating the amount and the purpose for which that is to be used? Or are you just relying on coding?
I have not seen anything to this point. To be honest, I have not yet asked for anything at that point. I'm just trying to reconcile the cash balances. And then once I get into a little bit more of the analysis of the use of the funds is when I would go to the step of asking to see any type of documentation that specifies how those funds are to be used.
Tom?
Gifts and donations are different things. not gifts, bequest. A bequest means somebody died. Okay. A gift means I'm giving you $5. So that's a distinction, that they're both money that's coming in. It's a gift in a form, but you differentiate from that. In terms of especially large donations that are bequests, normally there is a document that should be in a file somewhere in the library archives or someplace. Well, hopefully not the archives, but somewhere in their records for these large donations, that bequests that are still running around, that says it's to be used for the Petaluma Library for this purpose or whatever. And I think I have heard that that does exist somewhere. It's just a question of, I don't think the bookkeeping staff deal with that. That's a separate place that's kept.
I understand the distinction you're making between a gift and a bequest. Randy, from an accounting perspective, would we track those things differently, or would we have the same level of accountability for both? It would seem to me that we would, even though with a bequest, obviously the donor is less likely to be coming back to us for information on how the money was used.
From our perspective, we would want to look to see if there is an externally enforceable legal restriction as to how those funds are used, and that should be spelled out in any documentation. And again, that would go to, do we actually reflect that in the financial statements as restricted balances, or are they undesignated, unreserved, and can be spent on anything? I think that would all, again, go right back to the source documentation as to how those were initially set up.
Okay. And following up on Barbara's question and your comment, is it your sense that going back to the 2017, 2018 audit, that up through that time period, there was good tracking of these expenses relative to the income sources?
I can't really answer to whether or not there was good tracking. Only thing I can say is that it was in the published audit, and from my discussions with the auditor, Pasini and Brinker, they noted that the prior CFO had furnished that information to them as far as the allocation of the cash balances amongst the different sources. So that's what I'm using as my starting point, with the assumption that those must have been good if they had passed muster through the 17-18 audit.
Okay, well, listen, I understand the situation. I'm just going to underscore Commissioner Hauser's request. If you could get back to us next month with some additional information on this, we would really appreciate it. Absolutely. Okay, item 5.3, we've asked Director Ann Hammond to, on a monthly basis, give us an update about the working hours and disaster pay. Ann, can you share the latest with us, please?
It should be, there it is, last page of your packet. Jane, could you make it a little bigger?
Is that good?
And just scroll down, yeah. That's,
there
we
we
want to
go.
be able to see. So 12/19 looks like the last pay period that
Right.
in the year.
So you can see that we've made considerable progress. Back in March, we were paying about 60% of our total pay was disaster pay, and now we're down to a little over 6%. So that's very good progress.
Actually, it looks to me like you're down to less than 1%.
1% for the month or the period.
Yes, you're right. You're right. 6.3 for the whole, but 6.5 for this pay period under question.
I'm really glad to see that, and kudos to you and your staff for reducing this so significantly.
Right.
I see a small uptick in the last 2 weeks, but I don't know that this is enough to worry about. Any questions or comments from the committee on this?
Yes, this is Barbara. I had a question. For one thing, I it's a significant amount of money early on, and it shows the extent of the support of the commission and administration for the staff through those dark, very dark months. I'm wondering, when we had that prior talk earlier about the cost of salaries, I thought I heard that was part of it affected by the disaster pay. My understanding of the disaster pay where people were paid instead, while they weren't working, but this wasn't an additional cost. Am I wrong about that?
No, that's correct.
So this amount didn't raise that line item for salaries and benefits. It didn't raise it any.
Yes, you're correct.
Yeah. So, okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Well, it also looks like the bulk of the disaster pay happened in the last fiscal year,
Mhm.
right? Prior to July.
In July is when we started curbside service, and we've been
Yeah.
bringing people back since then.
Right. Okay, any other comments? Ann, thanks for reporting this. I'm going to ask that you continue to do this just so that we can, rest assured, but very grateful to you for getting this under control. The next item, we're at mid-year, and this would be requested adjustments to the budget. And along with this, Ann, I believe that there were some budget adjustments that did not actually make their way into the documentation, right? Can you comment on both of these?
Well, in September, we had a budget adjustment that we talked about earlier that didn't make it into the EFS.
Right.
But then there were earlier in the fiscal year, when the budget was first approved, and there was that list of projects that we were going to do with the surplus funds. Apparently, we missed a step there of having a proclamation by the commission to approve, not only approve the project, but to then that into the budget. So ANCAC is working on that proclamation, and we'll have that ready for you at the next commission meeting.
Okay, so that will be to make official those adjustments that the commission had already authorized. What about as you and your team are looking at the budget now, are there additional requests that you would like to make? And if so, I think it would be a good idea to review them with this committee before we take them to the full commission.
Yes, actually, we're in better financial shape than we anticipated. I would like to talk about making an adjustment to the personnel budget to bring back some of those positions that were frozen last year. And I'm working with Suzanne on an exact number for you. I kind of have a ballpark, but I'd like to refine that a bit before we bring it forward for discussion and approval by the commission. But I think as we're adding hours and services, it's been difficult for our staff because, we've had positions that were frozen at the end of the fiscal year, and then we've had a number of positions become vacant, and it's hard to keep up with the recruitment and the hiring. So people have been working really hard. Some of our locations have been short-staffed, and without the use of the extra help, also, it has been difficult. And now that we know that we're in better financial shape than we anticipated, I would like to revisit those decisions and give a little more attention to our personnel budget.
So what do you see as the timing of this? And when would you anticipate coming with a specific proposal request?
We can have it ready for the next commission meeting. I'm guessing it'll be somewhere in the probably under $200,000 range.
Would it
By
be permanent?
next commission, do you mean the February commission meeting or the March commission meeting?
I'm thinking February.
Okay,
If you'd rather wait until the finance committee can vet all of the information first, we can wait until March.
Committee members, what's your feeling on this? Is this something that you would feel comfortable seeing for the first time in the full commission, or that you would prefer to see first in more detail in this venue?
I always think it's better to have the committee review it and think about it. And then the commission feels more comfortable. You get fewer questions at the commission level.
Okay.
Now, having said that, I'm not going to say if it's only 200,000 that we couldn't do it. I don't know what the urgency is or something like that. So, but I think it's a better procedure, because if we really do have the committees review things properly, things move along better.
Yeah, I agree with that in principle, 100%, Tom. So I guess my question is, in this case, we're talking about an amount that's not a huge amount. How do you feel about this particular item, looking at it next week, or would you prefer that Ann come back to us next month before she goes to the full commission? Barbara, what's your thought?
Yeah, my thought, I agree with what's been said, basically. I think it is proper. We're talking about a budget adjustment. It needs to come through the finance committee. You know, it's too bad we didn't have the information today, but I understand it's not always possible to get it together. But I also would not want to hold up any position recruitment. That is the stresses and strains that are internal to empty positions and the work that you're talking about. And you'd be the judge of how imperative it is to get these hires going. If it's better to do that, you know, you see the need more than we're able to. So I would just support your opinion on that. Whether we should really wait another month to have the proper procedure. I do think that all budget adjustments do need to come through the finance committee, but I don't want to mess up something. If you feel there's a really strong need for some of these positions, let's get going with them.
There is a need, but I also know that the HR department is pretty swamped right now with the recruitments that they've got going. So if the committee would prefer to wait until March, that gives us more time to get all of the information compiled. And then I believe that HR will be in a better position to quickly move forward with the recruitments that have been approved.
I have a question. Are we talking about anything else besides $200,000 of salary? Are we talking about putting money back in the budget for the archives study or whatever it is? Well, is there something else out there that we should be putting in? And that's what I'm trying to get at. We should probably throw all the stuff together at one time, more or less.
I think she was just getting started with her list.
aha.
Yes. Is that correct, Director Hammond?
The projects that were approved last year that did not happen, the archives inventory was one of those. Some of the other projects that had to be put on hold when we were unsure about our budget. So those are things that will be coming before the commission at the February meeting. That's the proclamation that ANCAC is working on. We may find that we need to increase slightly for telecommunications. And that's something that I'm working on with Mike, our IT manager. And so if we wait until March for the request to increase personnel, then I will have a better idea if there are other line items that need a little boost as well. So I think that makes sense if we do it all at once.
So are we going to say, Ann, that you and the team will be ready at next month's Finance Committee meeting to present specific requests for revising the budget, and we'll review them prior to the full commission in the March meeting?
Yes, that's right.
Everybody okay with that?
And that
Yes.
includes personnel and the other projects that we cut from the budget some months ago? Or are we seeing those in the February meeting?
You'll see the projects in February.
Okay, good.
A quick follow-up.
Okay, good. Thank you.
A quick follow-up to that. Besides the archives review, what are the other amounts that'll be included in our resolution on at February? Do you know of?
I don't have that document in front of me. There were some refresh projects, which we've actually been continuing to work on because we didn't know about this step that we had missed. But then there were things like landscaping, parking lot striping, those things the commission may still decide to pull out and not approve. But I will get the full list that you saw at the last, when was that? That would have been in May when we passed the budget. I can get that and send it out to you all.
So these were items that we passed in the last budget. When did we pull them out?
When we got to, let's see, no, they had been passed the previous year.
Correct.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
that's the trick. Yes.
Okay.
Then I got to this year's budget. You pulled them out.
We cut them in the revision of last year's budget.
That
That's
was
right.
it. Yeah.
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think it's fine to deal with these matters in March. My concern, and it's only a small concern, is that I'm fine with doing this as long as we're talking about stuff in the $200,000 range or below for each kind of project. I don't want people to get a feeling that we're rolling in dough, because it looks like we are rolling in dough right now, but that could change momentarily.
Yeah.
And so, I just want to make sure we not use this as an opportunity to add more ornaments to the Christmas tree.
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree with it, Dave. I think it's important to manage perceptions in this situation, given the fact that there's a lot of unknowns ahead of us. Okay, thanks, Ann. We'll look forward to that. Next item, Randy, update on audits for 2018, 2019, and 2019, 2020. How are we doing?
We are progressing, albeit a lot slower than we had hoped. There are still a number of outstanding issues that we need to dig into. The first of which that I'll bring up are capital assets. Ricky has been unable to get into the software that I believe the library used to track its capital assets. And so we've come to the conclusion that what we need to do is, using 17-18 report as a starting point, we need to reconstruct what the capital asset listing should be for the library as of the end of 18-19 and then for 19-20. And we started this process and looking at the transactional level for capital assets, and quickly realized that we don't have enough knowledge on our side, nor should we actually be trying to on our side. When I say our side, Jennifer Murray is heading this up in determining what the projects are and where they should be appropriately classified. So we are going to start having meetings with division managers on February 1st. We start that next week to kind of go over some of our questions and hope that we're able to then make some headway into wrapping up the 18-19 capital assets issue. We're also going to use that as a way to leverage kind of discussing what capital assets are, what is appropriately classified as a capital asset and what isn't, just kind of as a refresher to make sure that going forward, everything is working as we believe it should be as far as capital assets go. The other issues that Jennifer is continuing to have are related to GASB 68, or I should say the pension information. She still has not received the correct report for 1819, and I know that payroll is working on that and getting that to her. She also needs information for compensated absences, as well as the flexible spending account and the health reimbursement account. She needs policy information on that. These are all items that are still outstanding. So unfortunately, I think I'd mentioned last month that I threw out a wild guess that we might see something within a month for 1819. Obviously, I was quite a bit off on that. It looks like we still have a little ways to go. But I am hopeful that once we get these capital asset meetings done, and once we do receive that information, that things will progress quickly from there for 1819. And then I would like to think that 1920 would follow fairly quickly after that. Does anyone have any questions for me on the audits?
Yeah, sorry that you've encountered these additional difficulties. Do you have any sense of how we got ourselves in this situation? And when the audit's done, will we also be positioned going forward to prevent these kinds of problems in the future?
That is our goal, is to make sure that not only are we addressing some of the problems in the past, but to make sure that we're set up so that we're not encountering these going forward, to make the audit process not quite so painful. I really can't answer as to how we got ourselves into this mess. There just may not have been a high level of understanding on the accounting side as far as how capital assets should be classified and recorded. Obviously, not being able to get into the fixed asset system has set us back somewhat as well, and that's nobody's fault. I think that's just an issue with the software, and again, Ricky has I know has reached out to the software company trying to find a way to get around that, and my understanding is that she's come up empty so far. So it's just a unfortunate number of issues.
Is that software, is that like a unique proprietary software?
That's my understanding. Yes, it's not the software that the county uses. It's a unique software for the library.
Well, I have a guess as to the source of many of these problems. Is that when Ken Neiman retired, he took a lot of knowledge that was only in his head with him, and therefore we don't have the capital asset stuff. We don't have the coding information about the bequests and gifts. He would have said, "Oh, right, this is blah, blah," but he's not with us. And for a medium or long-term goal, I think it should be to work toward a written accounting manual that explains in permanent form how these things are to be handled.
Could I weigh in just for a second? I agree with David. I'm sure we all do. In terms of written documentation and the loss of institutional knowledge when we have significant people leave the library like Ken. I just want to say that in the years that I was the chair of the finance committee, we went through the audit process. The only material weakness that I believe we ever had was the capital asset inventory. And it was only whatever audit year this is, fiscal year ending 16, that was the material weakness. And I know that Ken did that, and it wasn't a weakness anymore in the following year. So there is a capital asset list that isn't terribly old. It's current through at least 17, if not 18. So it is frustrating because I'm sure it isn't, it exists. And we didn't have one at all. And then this capital asset list was updated and passed the audit and just a couple of, recently. So anyway, it's unfortunate. I always feel bad that we're not able, I guess, under whatever legalities, that we can't ever hire somebody while the other person is still there and pass along the knowledge to them. So, we don't find ourselves in these situations. Anyway, thank you. I just want to make that comment that we do have a fairly recent capital asset listing. Thank you.
I hope so. And Randy, thanks for the extra work you and your team are doing. We will certainly look forward to an update next month.
I have a question for Randy.
Please, Tom.
Would it be normal to have a written accounting booklet or something like that to write all that stuff down, accounting procedures booklet or something?
Yes, it's something that we would highly recommend. All entities should have some type of policy, written policy for everything that they do. Again, one thing that I mentioned is also we're looking for a flexible spending account and health reimbursement account policy. Anything that should be documented, we need to see for audit purposes. So yes, it's a good practice to have policies, written policies that kind of take the question out of things for people that have to actually do the work.
So following up on that, just for the minutes, I'm hearing that going forward, we should have in place written policies with regard to our fixed assets, our flexible spending accounts and health spending accounts. Are there other areas like that, Randy, where we also need to have written policies and practices, and so far we don't seem to?
I haven't dug into it at that level. What I would like to mention is that many of our clients who are independent districts, many times basically do the Me Too policy, where they say that they are adopting the county's policies. The county does have written policies for just about everything. And I would encourage you to really consider that as your first stop. No sense in reinventing the wheel if one's already there.
Understood.
And let me just interject that I believe at the last commission meeting, I said that I wanted to reinvigorate the Policies and Procedures Committee. So I'm certainly taking notes here, and these will be these will be on the list.
Thank you, Deborah.
And perhaps, Randy, if you, I appreciate the Me Too reference. If there are things that as you're digging through the material and you think, man, there should be a policy about that, if you would note that for us, we'd appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other comments relating to the audits? Okay, items for our next committee meeting.
Changes in the budget.
I'm sorry, would you say?
Yeah,
Changes in the budget.
We're expecting Ann to present to us a specific request for changes in the budget.
And hopefully something about those two accounts, the Kundi Fund and the foundation.
Yep.
Could we clarify though? I'm sorry, could we clarify just, I'm sorry to, I feel like I'm beating a dead horse here, but let's go back to, Ann, what are you presenting to us at the February meeting? Are you going to go over the list of things that we cut out of the budget in last year and then say, I'd like to add these to the budget? Are you going to wait until March to talk about personnel and all of those issues?
February, I will show you the list of projects that were put on hold and suggest the ones that we should approve to renew.
And approve in February.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then in March will be the other options.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you. So sorry.
We've discussed in the past putting together a system-wide balance sheet for the library as of December 31st. I'd like maybe a report on progress toward that. It may be we can't do a balance sheet until we figure out the bequests and donations, but I would like a report on that.
I would like to asterisk the earlier discussion about the reports on the gifts, donations, and bequests. And we keep talking about Kundi, but there's more. And so that's just one to make sure we have the details on all of them. Please.
Understood.
Thank you.
Yeah, Kundi just has special significance if Tom wants to go to a friend's meeting, which he does. But we understand that those line items include other specifics that we have to dig into.
Well, I think it's wonderful for the finance committee to take a look at that. I also think that it may be time for us to take a look at the development efforts, you know, in a total perspective. What do our gifts look like? What do the bequests look like? Just so that not only the commission, but also staff know sort of where is the money? What percentage, where does the money come from? I think that would be a helpful thing for our new commissioners, and frankly, for some of the commissioners like myself who have been around. It's just a good reminder of what the funding patterns are.
Deborah, are you seeing that for this committee or for the commission as a whole? Sorry, I was.
For the commission as a whole, I think, yeah. But the money part is here, but the global part is elsewhere.
Understood. Okay. Any other items for our next meeting? Okay. Thank you all. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being so well prepared. And we'll adjourn at 4:16.
Andy, thank you for readable reports.
We're working on it, Tom.
Small but readable.
Thank you, Jason.
Small but readable.
We'll try to get them sized up a little better for you all.
Okay.
Much
Thank you.
appreciated.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks,
Man,
Randy.
Ian, thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.